welcome. I am super thrilled to have you as my guest on Talk with Sally. And just so people who are listening or watching understand who you are and what you do, could you please introduce yourself and your role at Coca-Cola?
Yes, well, super excited to be here and to have this chat with you. My name is James Williams, and just closing out my job of being the General Manager and Vice President of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games here in Tokyo, Japan for Coca-Cola.
And crikey, what a journey that has been for you, James, because I've had the privilege and pleasure of supporting you on that journey as your leadership mentor, and was, to be honest, just in awe of how you pulled that together and kept the focus and delivered. And one thing I'd be fascinated to understand from you, how would you naturally describe your leadership style? And given the complexity of the games and the pandemic, and it's a word that's used so much, but uncertainty of could we even deliver it, would it even happen? How did your management style and leadership style evolve to really be effective in that situation?
In terms of my leadership style, I think over time, there's three things I would say. One is adaptive. And if I look back over my career to date, it's been many different places. So whether it was in Europe when I was in the UK, whether I did the London Games there, or whether it was in Brazil for 4 years, or whether it was here in Tokyo, you always have to adapt to the situation, the culture, and everything that's around you. I'd also say that it was evolving. I constantly feel as though I need to evolve as I get more experiences, work with different people, different situations. My leadership style has evolved. It's a bit similar. I always use the analogy of wine. I think leadership is like wine. You can never stop learning about wine in terms of the different types, the different places it comes from, what it goes with food. And for me, that's what leadership is you're constantly learning, growing, evolving, and developing your leadership styles as you get older. And then I think the final one for me would be, I'd like to think it was inspiring. I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to inspire people to be the best that they can be in what they do and deliver their best work. And I think that's quite core to what we have to do. So I think all of those elements played into the last 5 years.
Absolutely. And in terms of the evolving, I'm curious to understand, what would you see as your key difference from delivering, say, in Rio and then delivering in Tokyo, given what happened with the pandemic? What would be the three very different things that you saw or witnessed your leadership style evolving to within that context?
I think when I was here and during the pandemic, there were certain things, that new muscles that you grow as you become a more experienced leader. For me, I probably over-indexed on a few things because of the pandemic. And one was my listening skills. I had to really, really listen to my team because there was so much going on, not only in the work point of view, but also the home point of view. And for me, it was listening for the nuances of what's going on in their private life, because we were in lockdown. So if we think of the situation, March 2020, we had a team of 60 of us, suddenly the rug's being pulled from beneath us, and suddenly there's no games.
Yes.
And then you're told to sit at home and deal with it on your own. The other one was trust. We had a change of leadership. So in 2020, I went from being the VP of marketing to then being the GM towards the end of 2020. And that meant leading a whole new team in a different way, and really having to give them trust in them, believe in them. And then two more was empathy. People were going through so much on so many levels. It's easy to
forget, isn't it, now that we're kind of in a different place? Yeah.
Exactly, because we forget the pandemic side of it. And I try and pull this back and go, when I speak to friends, I was like, oh, how did you cope? And I was like, well, it wasn't, we got stuck at home, we were locked in at home, homeschooling, all this kind of stuff. So for me, it was about the empathy. It's really starting to engage with the team and not keep it all about work. And then the final one, and one for me, is the vulnerability. So it wasn't just about saying, great, this is fun, let's go, let's run, we're going to carry on going. It was like, oh, well, yeah. And I never forget the story, it was so 11 days out from the games, the organising committee decided to cancel spectators, everyone. So the whole team was looking at different ways, whether it was hospitality, consumer promotions, or just internal ticket, everything like that. We had to look at it a different way. And I called a team meeting exactly the next day because we found out the night before. And the first thing in the morning, and I just put up this photo of this person, black and white photo, just crunched in the corner of a room, just black and white, and said, "How did you all feel? Because this is how I felt last night."
Yeah.
Like, we've gone through so much. We're 11 days away from it. And I think that really helped the team to go, okay, it hurts. And it did. So to share that with them, I think made a lot of difference.
Yeah, I'd also say, knowing you as well as I do, they're natural traits of yours to have, to index on, which is very helpful in the context of what you were having to do. And you mentioned there also about getting the team to trust in themselves, but certainly from our work together, I also witnessed just how much you invested in helping them to trust you as that new leader, which when you're recasting from within a team is not always an easy feat. But I think you achieved that brilliantly. It's down to those areas that you've been sharing just now on our call that help that duality piece happen. I think your story is really interesting because you almost had like a mini whirlwind of what other companies are going through on a much kind of more marathon-esque ways of working. So were there any changes, James, or any structures or frameworks that you found really helped with flow, with keeping momentum when you had such intense volatility in such a condensed time frame?
Yeah, it's now coming flooding back. Oh yeah. It's a good one, really. And I think, again, it was a classic moment for me where everyone was looking to me to go, so do you have all the answers? And it wasn't just my team. It was also the organizing committee in Japan. They were like, well, you've worked on a number of games. What do we do? And our leadership team and, colleagues around the world, like, okay, so what are we doing? And I was like, well, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't done one of these before. Never done a pandemic, least of all an Olympics in one. So what I did for the team was really to kind of break it down into pieces for them. Because again, it's that you've got to understand the team and what they're going through. And for them, it was just like, okay, the house of cards just come tumbling down. I broke it down into bite-sized pieces for them. And the first one was, okay, what's the immediate thing that we have to do? So we had to stop this freight train that is the Olympics that's been planning for 4 years and go, whoa, you put the brakes on and quickly.
Wow.
And what do we need to stop? What can we, save? What can we repurpose? So I thought, okay, there's a team that need to focus on that. So keep each of these teams focused on different things. The other one was, you never get a chance like this in the Olympics to stop, review, reflect, and also celebrate. It was March 2020, so we'd delivered about a year and a half of work, but you're working at such a pace that you just keep going and going. You don't have time to stop and look. And one of the things we did was we re-looked at all of our legacy plans and said, okay, what's working, what's not? And if the games is going to go ahead in a year, and at this point we were told, yes, it will, what do we need to adjust? And go back to the strategies and the legacies, because the fundamentals of it, because we don't know how we're going to execute, but we know what the outcomes we want. Mm-hmm. So for me, there was that piece. So how do we do that? And then the bit that you alluded to before that we worked on, which was, how do I get the team to focus on rebuilding themselves? So actually find their individual purpose. And I did this piece of work with them, taking a leaf out of Simon Sinek's book of Find Your Why. I got all of the team to start remembering why they joined the team. So go back and find out why you're here, why you joined this, and the power of this. And I joined the games because of this or because of that. And then we slowly built that up to be the engagement of the team. So, okay, now we're going to rebuild the team. What's our team purpose? So let's all grind. And it kept them focusing on building not only that, the behaviors that we wanted to have over the next year, the values that we believed in, so that we could be this kind of phoenix out of the flames without knowing what was going to be. So it was, a lot of that was preparation and preparing, but taking their eye off the big, hairy thing that was like, we don't know if we've got people, we don't know if there's a games, we don't know if people can get into the country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I remember that time, and I remember what was also really, I think, exciting is the right word to use when I saw what you were doing, is you shared yours too. So you were absolutely in and amongst it. And I think that gave an access on an emotional level to you as the new leader, but also for each other as the team in a really quick, clear, visual way.
Yeah. And you because you gave me the idea of the superheroes piece. So
yes,
we created all of these things, these little Japanese superhero caricatures, so for everyone on the team, and we've got it now as this painting or this kind of graphic of that was what it was. And that was a theme that then ran through the next 18 months as to, you guys are a bunch of superheroes, but you've got your individual superpowers. Each of you brings collectively something to the table, which in Japan is sometimes a bit challenging because Japan likes everyone to be consistently the same.
yeah.
But the other one was giving people permission. And this was to give them permission to get things wrong. Because everyone was like, well, what do we do about this? What do we do? Well, look, I don't know, you don't know. So let's go with what our gut says. This is what we all think. It makes sense. Let's give it a try. And if it's wrong, then fine. We'll take a hit on it, but that's it. We learn from it and we move on. And I think we had to do that very quickly and very rapidly across all of the different projects.
Calling it out though and making it a permission, it's really liberating, isn't it? For you as well.
Yeah.
As well as for the rest of the team. And the reason why the superhero piece I think works so well is the one thing I find clients often find surprising when I'm working with them like you and I do is I'll say, but make it fun. Because you can be in this big corporate, like you say, hairy beast where it's so much investment, there's so much at stake, like it literally high stakes. And it can get a bit too boring, let's be honest, a bit too inhumane, a bit too lacking in emotion and the fact that the people have to believe in it and feel it to do it. And so that little superhero idea that was such fun to work on with you gave that element of a bit of a really a bit of fun, but also was so integral. Although it was a bit of fun, it actually wasn't. It was that was the spark, wasn't it? The magic, getting that into the team.
Yeah, and it was, and you're right, biggest brand in the world, biggest sporting occasion in the world comes with a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Japan, everyone felt it like, well, what are we going to do? And it just took the edge off it. And everyone's got a book now at the end of it where everyone's got their superhero image and their photo and everyone signed it. So everyone takes that little piece away from them with them.
Which is wonderful. And given how hard everyone worked, absolutely deserved more than. You mentioned about behaviour and looking at the behaviours you wanted in the team, recasting that in the context of the pandemic and the volatility, uncertainty. Were there any times though when you really noticed a bit of a pendulum swing, either positive or negative, and what you as their leader did to either address the negative quickly and recalibrate it, but also celebrate and amplify the positive?
There was definitely one thing that we put in place because one of the reasons there was the change in the leadership is the team didn't feel the engagement. There was a big restructure going on. They weren't massively engaged as a team. And I think part of it was actually, how do I change that? And that was, for me, comes back to the trust and the honesty piece, because we used to have, and we would do it as anonymous questions. So we went through, and each week we would have, or each month in our town hall, here's all the anonymous questions. And I encouraged the team, you know what? Ask whatever you want. It's anonymous, so I'm not going to know who it is. And I worked with my team who managed it all through. And when things were coming out and we got a sense of my leadership team, guys, what are the problems? What are you feeling? What are your teams feeling? Let's bring it up. Let's talk about the elephants in the room. We don't go, oh, this happened or that happened, because we were trying to put in place. And again, because everyone had built that kind of house of values and behaviors, everyone had got the chance to vote on them. Nice. So people then police them themselves because, hey, it's not me choosing these. In fact, to a point, I started to step away from it when we got into the nuts and bolts of it. But that's when you call out the behaviors. And we called them teamship rules.
Nice.
So we called them those kind of things that, like, this is what being a team, you've got to look after each other. we're all going through a really tough time, so look after your teammates. And that was a requirement.
Was it anything specific, either the pressure or the uncertainty or the constant changing, that you saw had the biggest negative impact on your people?
It's yeah, so it's the negative news. So after a while, it just started to continue to be negative. So you woke up in the morning, oh, okay, this has come out in the press, we get a heads up about an hour before, we try and download that to the team, everyone's like, oh, well, I've just been working on this has changed. And it was a case of like, okay, great, look, we can't control, and again, control what you can control, don't worry about what you can't control.
Yeah,
we do what we have to do properly, we follow what we do properly, and we celebrate it. So you were talking about seeing those moments. Each month we would celebrate all the people in the team for jobs that they'd done, and they could be the smallest thing in the world. But like, hey, if it wasn't for you helping me do this, I couldn't have done that. And by the way, we've got this plan in place. It might change because we had, I don't know how many scenario plans. So we would just take a different direction on it. So I think we would always highlight that, so people felt confident and they saw people that were doing that. For me was how we kept the positivity up and calling out the negativity. And also, in fairness, letting people vent is sometimes like, you know what, we just all want to have a bit of a moan and a whinge sometimes.
Yeah,
and you create the opportunity for people to do that. And you rip it up, you leave it, you put it, that's it, we're done. Yeah, okay, put it in the bin, let's move on.
So it's really obvious from listening to you how much you've learned, how much you, and I've got the privilege of knowing you as your mentor, seeing how much you've developed and strengthened through the experience, not just this games, the most recent one, but also all the previous ones running up to that. But given that the world is still incredibly uncertain, which in itself, I don't know about you, but even that word, everyone's like, oh, can we just move on? So what 3 tips, James, from your unique experience in the games, in that microcosm of all roads leading to uncertainty to deliver this incredible world event, what 3 tips would you give for any other leader who equally has to deliver a fixed outcome, but in the context of this ever-changing landscape that we're all navigating and just continues to change day by day?
I think if I break it down into probably 3 different areas. So the first tip would be it's all about supporting the team, but doing that in a genuine and honest way. And for me, it's about how do you empower them? How do you provide them with the direction without telling them what to do? Supporting them, installing belief in themselves. So the hardest thing in these kind of things is just everyone doesn't know what to do. So therefore they're like, oh my God. And therefore everyone retracts inside themselves. And what we have to do is make that easy for them, show belief in them, show trust, but genuine honesty, honest trust in them. So I think the first one is just the team. How do you allow them to be the best to be themselves? And that takes trust, and it takes, belief. The other one is then, and this is a personal one. So for me, there was a lot of pressure, and at times it was lonely. I'll be honest. There was definitely moments, and I'm sure we definitely had a few sessions of like, okay, so we're in this situation. I feel as I'm on my own. And what I developed was then probably a bit more of an external network. So there was about 5 friends, now close friends, that worked on the games outside of Coca-Cola, but different parts of the game's kind of makeup. And we would have regular catch-ups and people that were going through the same thing, because you need to bounce ideas off people. So it was a nice thing. We would have dinners, obviously in the pandemic, more challenging. Japan was a little bit more open, so we had windows of dinners. So we would do that, and it was good for me. It was good for us to all sit, and there was 4 of us, and we would just chat, like, how are you dealing with this? How are you dealing with that? So for me, that protected me a little bit. So you got the team piece, and I've got the me piece. And then the other one is just breathe. I think what happens is we just go 100%, and we just don't stop, and we feel that's what we need to do. But what I quickly realized was, because it was going to be a year-long piece of work, this, with the pandemic and then delivering the games and everything, I had to give myself the breaks. I had to give myself the space before I cracked, because if I broke, the team potentially, you know, it was one of those things, you've got to make sure that you give yourself that time to breathe at each hurdle. So I think that was probably my third one.
So trust and belief in your team and getting them to really believe in that and feel that, getting that peer support for yourself so that you're not having to cope completely in isolation as the leader, and then making sure you're taking time out so that your perspective can keep healthy and you can pace yourself to get through the endurance of the event, as opposed to falling under the pressure of the event.
Exactly. That's so much better than I did.
No, it's easy when you're summarizing. It's easy when you're summarizing. And so, just as we're coming to the end of our chat, I'm always interested when I've worked with a guest on Talk with Sally, just to get your perspective on, having worked with me on high performance leadership, what's been the most impactful or helpful nugget of advice or framework or tool that you've taken away from our work together, James, and how has it helped you?
It's been incredible. It's been so helpful, and I wouldn't be probably here today if you hadn't helped me through those moments. So I'm very grateful for that. You've got a number of tools that really help in different situations. One, I think, during the pandemic is the way that you provide that honest sounding board, and someone that's going to challenge me on the way that I'm looking at something. You're not afraid to question me on where I'm going or what I'm thinking. And that for me is refreshing, because there are a lot of people who don't challenge me on that. And sometimes that just means I go down. So for me, during those periods, it was great to have someone that could actually go, hey, do you think that's the right thing? Or maybe you should be doing this. And working through the problem with me, which I thought was super helpful for me over those times. And then the one thing, and we always talk about this, is your LVB. For me, that is a tool for me to be able to project where I want my leadership to be and where I want to move to and the areas that I'm going to work on. For me, because it's visual, and I know I struggle with it.
Leadership vision board. I love how much of a client you are of mine, because you're totally in my lingo. But yeah, an LVB, for anyone watching or reading, is a leadership vision board technique.
Yeah, so I'm even caught in that. So, and because it's visual, and I'm visual as a person, that really helps me to understand, hey, where I am and where I want to be. And again, you challenge me on, okay, is that realistic? So I think that's one of the tools, but I think just your general sense of will be able to very succinctly challenge where I'm thinking and question me to be looking in a different direction, I think has massively helped me.
Oh, thank you. It's always nice to hear the feedback, but also to know how it's helping. And it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to support you, James, throughout your various roles as you've been with Coca-Cola. And I just see that flame in the background there. And what an incredible legacy you've left in how you and your team did deliver in circumstances I'm sure you and your wildest dreams never thought you would lead through so many different challenges and do it so well. Yeah. So hats off to you, James, and to your team, and thank you so much for being a really great guest on Talk with Sally.
And thank you. It's been great.
Pleasure.